Hello, friends, and welcome back to Doug Reads with Friends. It's a podcast in which I, Doug, invite my friends to choose a book and come on the podcast. We both read the book, and here on the podcast, we talk about the book, we talk about their life, we talk about our friendship, anything that we want to. The book is an excuse for me to call up my friends and have a good conversation with them. Today, in episode 7, we get to have a conversation with Dr. Lana Mahgoub. Lana is a Grinnell College alum and was a member of a posse at Grinnell College that I got to mentor. If you're not familiar with the Posse Foundation, we talk about it a bit here in this conversation. It is a wonderful, wonderful organization that changed my life, certainly. And I know the members of the posse that Lana was in. I am going to have all 10 members of the posse on eventually, and was thrilled to be able to have the first one today with Lana. We talked about the book Culpability by Bruce Holsinger, a wonderful novel, a challenging novel, which has AI at the heart of it. It is a great conversation about her work as a psychologist, about being a mom, about this book, about our posse, and a host of other things. So enjoy this conversation with Dr. I'm so proud of her, Dr. Lana Mahgoub. In 2010, my entire life changed in a really wonderful and positive way, because that was the year that I became a posse mentor at Grinnell College. The Posse Foundation, which we're going to talk about here in a bit, is one of my absolute favorite organizations on the planet, and brought 10 of the absolute best people in the world into my life where they are today. Now, here we are coming up on 16 years later. All 10 of them are eventually going to appear on the podcast. But today, Dr. Lana Mahgoub is here today to join the podcast and talk about the book that she chose. So first of all, Lana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Posse. When you meet somebody who doesn't know what Posse is or what the Posse Foundation is, what do you tell them?
Yeah, so I describe it as it's really a program where 10 people are selected from a really rigorous process of really looking for leadership skills in high school and things that we may have been involved in. And ultimately, these 10 people that are selected come together and become a posse, which is a support system for each other going into college, which we know can be such a stressful process, especially if it's far away from home, which it definitely was for our posse, moving from like the DC area to Iowa in the middle of the cornfields. And so every week we'd meet and we would have meetings with you and be mentored and have this support network built in where we can just process through any challenges that came up and make sure that we stay in college and reach the goals that we all intended to have.
How did it impact you being a Posse scholar in college? What was that like in college, having a posse there with you?
Yeah, it was huge. Came into college with 9 other best friends, which is not an experience that very many people get to have. And the other thing is we spend so much time even prior to going to college getting to know each other and doing this deeper work where we're really vulnerable with one another. And I think for me personally, that's something that changed quite a bit, where I learned to open up about deeper things that were going on in my life with people and then have that support network going into college. So it was great.
How does having been a Posse scholar continue to impact you now?
We learn so much, I think, throughout the process as we're posse scholars, where we step into positions of leadership, which everyone in our posse has done, even at Grinnell. And so it just helps equip you with the confidence to continue to carry on in these leadership roles even afterwards. And what I love about our posse, as you know, is we stick together. We still talk. We're still friends. So it's a lifelong friendship.
Yeah, it's the best. For me, as an incredibly, incredibly lucky mentor, I think our posse was lucky in a lot of different ways. I think the 10 of you really clicked well. The 10 of you all decided to trust me, right? I think one of the things to know about Posse is that it selects students from urban public high schools who would be otherwise overlooked by the traditional college admissions process. Those are phrases straight out of the Posse playbook. And here I am, a middle-aged white guy balding in khakis in the middle of Iowa, trying to connect with and learn from and be a mentor to 10 absolutely phenomenal young people who I kind of don't have a lot in common with, immediately, but we clicked really, really well, all of
We
us.
did.
And having been a posse mentor is the best thing I've ever done professionally and changed so much of my life of how I view my work, how I relate to other people, things that I care about. And then has me now still today, as you said, we're still very close, right? We talk every 4 to 6 months. We all get on a group Zoom call together. And now there are posse babies, there are posse spouses, there are, right? All of you are in your early 30s and launching into careers. For your husband, what is it like being married to a posse scholar or marrying into a posse family, especially one as tight as our posse has been?
A lot of folks from the posse were able to make it to our wedding, fortunately. And I think he was a little bit nervous about, like, how am I going to fit in? Like, are they going to like me? And I think he fit right in. Even afterwards, people from the posse were coming and saying, yeah, we like him. And
Good.
so,
Very
yeah,
important.
yeah, he's part of the family.
That's great. So you went from Grinnell straight into graduate school. I introduced you as Dr. Lana a little bit ago. Tell us about your doctoral program and what you're doing now.
So I stayed in the Midwest. I went from Iowa to Wisconsin to Nebraska. I did my doctorate in University of Wisconsin-Madison in a school psychology program. And I guess I've kind of known since high school I've always wanted to be a psychologist, so I just kept going on my path. But it was really good. I had a lot of great experiences in Wisconsin. Created kind of a little posse within my cohort, my small cohort in grad school, that also helps, support me through the rest of the time being, because it's a long program. Being in grad school takes a very long time. From there, yeah, did my internship in Nebraska, and now finally back in my home state of Virginia, practicing as a psychologist.
So school psychology, what is the difference in a PhD in school psychology versus other kinds of psychology?
So, coming from a school psychology program, really the difference is that you're focused in pediatric population and have the skills and ability to also learn how to develop like IEP programming for kiddos, understanding accommodations and interventions that are really needed for kids with different needs. So that's a lot of the background that I come in with. Ultimately, there are a lot of folks actually from my graduate program in school psychology that didn't end up working in schools. So, many of us actually went on to work in children's hospitals or outpatient settings. But we still, all have that pediatric focus.
And do I recall correctly that you have recently taken the very brave step of hanging out your own shingle and working for yourself independently?
I did. I did. I left a children's hospital that I loved and worked for 5 years. But yeah, I started my own thing recently. I have a private practice
And
now.
so, how does that work? Who are you? Who are your clients? What are the types of things that you offer to people? Let's do a little
Yeah.
advertisement for you.
So I still have very much the pediatric focus. I've extended kind of my age range a little bit to work with college age students, just because sometimes they can be pretty similar to working with the teens as well. But navigating these new life transitions and growing independence, being away from home. So I work really with a range of different presentations. I could be treating anxiety disorders, depression, and mood disorders. I do a lot of actual parent training. So kiddos that maybe have disruptive behaviors or getting in trouble a lot and have big emotions that are hard to control. I do spend a lot of time, especially if they're really young kids, actually working with the parent on learning some evidence-based ways to really manage those behaviors better and build a really strong relationship with their kid. So those are some of the things that I do. I've had a lot of experience with psychological testing. So families that are needing some clarity around, what may be going on with their child and how to best support them, I've been able to do too. And in the process of actually starting up some therapy groups as well. So sometimes being in a group setting with other kids that are all going through anxiety or all have big emotions and, trouble with navigating their feelings can be really supportive.
How has the shift to online counseling impacted you, if at all? I mean, you must have been in grad school, just out of grad school when COVID hit. So
Yeah.
are you doing this type of thing on a webcam and headset a lot, or are you really in person most of the time?
Yeah. So currently with my private practice, it is solely virtual. I do have plans to go back to doing some in-person work. But when I was at the hospital all that time, I actually saw a pretty like even mix of people that really wanted solely virtual care just because of the convenience it offers, being able to meet from their car, from at home in the comfort, of their own home, and people that really wanted to come in person. And so I think what's interesting is actually there's a lot of research that suggests like virtual services can be just as effective as in-person care. It comes down to a lot of just kind of comfortability of like what a patient may be wanting though.
So let's tie the first two parts of this conversation together a little bit, posse and your degree in psychology. Because I noticed even when you were talking about the posse, I felt like there were some terminology or some ideas. How does your degree in psychology impact how you think about or talk about our posse, or how you think of and talk about being a posse scholar?
In psychology, we think a lot about social relationships with one another, how they develop, the impact that has even on our mental health to have support systems in place. So I can definitely see that connection where that was something that was built in and created for us naturally within the posse. And it's protective because I think one of the missions with posse as well is we want to reduce dropout. We see a lot of times people who independently go out on their own to college. They don't have a support network. They struggle with making friends. Maybe they're really anxious about it. And then they drop out, right? They don't get to achieve those goals that they set out to achieve. And so I think it's protective in a lot of ways, even for our mental health, to have a system like this.
How about being a mom? I mean, you're an expert, you're a doctorate in psychology of children. How does that impact how you think about being a mom or how you interact with your daughter?
It's so interesting because I've done this work with families for so long and live experiences of supporting them through supporting their kids, but then you have your own kid. It's interesting that like how some things really apply and they work really well, and then your kid throws you for a loop. They're like, "No, I'm not doing that." And so I feel like you learn a lot across, along the process about how to adjust. Also, part of it I think in therapy that I do with families where I tell parents, every child is unique. It's not a one size fits all model where I'm going to tell you to do just this and that's going to work perfectly. Because now I even know, even from my own experience of working with my daughter, like we've got to adjust a lot to get her to, feel more regulated sometimes.
The theory of how you get a kid to calm down and go to sleep or brush their teeth or eat their vegetables and the practicality of doing it in the moment of a mom, I imagine can sometimes be two very different things.
Yes. And I'm not ashamed to say my kid right now is going through a sleep regression. We're still working through it. And it's not an easy fix.
It's not that you should be ashamed by it at all. I mean, in anything, I think that it might be really helpful for your clients to know, like, yeah, this is really hard. And even when you've got a PhD in this area, even when you're an expert in this area, it's still really hard and sleep regressions happen. And so I think that makes you more human, I would guess, to your clients. One other thing that I wanted to talk with you about, especially in the context of this podcast and reading, is that you're also an author. And I am very proud that I own a copy of your book, perhaps the first copy of your book here in the Middle East. But tell us a little bit about your book and the process of writing it.
I authored a book called How Sarah Fought Her Scary Thoughts. And it's really a therapeutic children's book. I came up with the idea years ago. It's always something I've wanted to do, to author something that can support and just reach a wider audience. I wrote it during pandemic times, but I was really thinking about the impact of the pandemic on children's mental health and all the influx, right, of need and referrals that were coming in for us for children that were just struggling so much to connect and to cope and even to readjust back to school after things had reopened. One of the themes, try to kind of put some nuggets of information in there for families around like what anxiety can look like for kids, including maybe some less obvious things like kids can maybe snap back and seem more oppositional in these moments where they're really overwhelmed. But it's not that they're a bad kid in any way. It's just that we want to look at this lens of what is it that they're needing in that moment. And maybe there's something deeper like anxious feelings that are underlying that for them. But it's really kind of based on CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy approaches where you think about taking some baby steps towards those feared situations that maybe you're avoiding. And so Sarah in the story does that. She takes some baby steps towards doing things that she was fearful about and eventually is able to, adapt back to school and go out with her friends again. And it tries to really just destigmatize this idea of it's okay to seek out mental health services. I know culturally for me, that's a big thing where a lot of folks, even in my own family, to be honest, still struggle with reaching out for help, asking for help. And so I really tried to create this as a resource of you can do that and things are going to be okay.
What do you think made the difference for you in that way, as somebody from the Sudanese community who very much obviously embraces mental health therapy, works to destigmatize it, works to draw people into this very helpful practice? What do you think made the difference for you in feeling so good about that?
I think observation. I may have shared with you before, but like one of the reasons why I wanted to become a psychologist is I had this amazing opportunity my senior year in high school to shadow a school psychologist and just observing the impact that she had on all these children's lives at the school. Seeing interventions that were working, that were helping kids get better, also helped me put together the pieces of like, hey, for people that I even know in my immediate family, that this is something that could be really useful. And I'd love to be a person who can create that kind of impact in the world too.
What do you love about being a therapist? What gets you up and gets you going to work every day, gets you excited, gets you going?
I love my job. I love all aspects of my job. Like sometimes it can be really challenging, but I think for me, seeing the change, seeing the positive change, and being able to graduate families and kids from care is really the most exciting part. Because I do tell all my families from the get go, like my goal is not to hold on to you forever. Like there is a lot of research and a lot of thought behind this, the interventions that we're doing together, and the coping strategies that we're developing, and the practice, even live in sessions that we do every time that we meet. And so my goal was to help you fly free and like use those tools independently in the future and be able to graduate from here. And so I love having like celebrations at the end, actually, with all my kids where they meet their therapy goals, they're feeling much better, they're seeing difference in their lives. And then we celebrate that in a really fun way, whether it be singing karaoke sometimes with some of my kids or blowing up balloons and just sometimes having treats. So we always do that in fun ways.
That's wonderful. What does career progression look like as a therapist? Do you have future goals that you want to meet, or future things that you want to do, or things that you want to learn? Where do you see yourself in 20 years or 30 years and continuing to be challenged in this work?
I think someone who like is addicted to work. It's hard for me to think about like retiring at some point because I do love the work I do and I know I want to continue it for a while. So I think I'll always have a foot in this work. I'll probably continue to see clients for quite some time. But something that I did a lot of as well in the last several years has been like mentorship and supervision of like growing the next generation of clinicians. And so I think moving forward, even in my own practice, I'm hoping for plans of expansion in the future and being able to pass down that knowledge and information to grow the next generation of clinicians.
Does that mean bringing other people on board into your practice?
Potentially.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Let's talk a little bit about you as a reader. What role does reading generally play in your life?
I've always been a lifelong reader. Since a very young age, can actually think back to times where I would be sneaking around in my family's apartment where I would get out of my room in the middle of the night and I'd have a book that I was really eager to finish. I needed to know the ending. And so I'd go into the most dimly lit hallway and squint my eyes in the dark to like finish this book at 1 a.m. So that's kind of the kid that I was growing up. And I think it's probably contributed to why my eyesight is so horrible. And I started wearing glasses at an early age because I was reading in the dark if I needed to. But stories have always just given me this wonderful escape. They've given me this place to, go into fantasy worlds and learn about so many different things. And that's always been really important to me. And I think naturally it's also been a tool that I've used to just cope with frustrating situations. If I felt, upset or frustrated about something, like my go-to was always like reading a book. And it's just kind of worked for me.
And today, I imagine perhaps a lot of your reading is of very short books with lots of pictures that you read again and again. One of my other guests on a previous podcast said that has a child of about the same age and said that
Yeah.
was his case. Is that for you as well now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Goodnight Moon, read 20 times in a row. Yep.
I believe Goodnight Moon was name checked in that other conversation as well. Do you get to read for yourself now much, or you've got your own business? You're a very busy, in-demand psychologist. You're a mom. You've got lots of other things going on. Do you get to read much now, or do you still have to sneak around at night?
So I think I've noticed a shift, especially since turning into a mother, where like really it's just most practical for me to do audiobooks right now. I love, having a a hard book in my hands. And I try to do that, when I can. But, when I don't have my daughter with me in the car, we're not listening to Elmo's music all the time. I'm usually listening to either a podcast or an audiobook, during commutes. So that's kind of been what's most practical for me lately.
Do you have specific books that you look for or a type of genre that you try to listen to?
I really like thought-provoking books. The author, Judy Picoult, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she's someone who's written a lot of like thought-provoking books too, just around like social issues in our world. I also like psych thrillers, murder mysteries. Those types of books I'll really get into as well.
Has the shift to audiobook been an easy one for you? I have to admit, I have a very hard time with audiobooks. I find myself drifting off and not paying attention to them. Do they work really well for you, though?
For me, they do. I feel like I am kind of an oddball and like maybe I can listen to something. I can even listen to a book maybe in double speed and like still retain and kind of get the gist of what's going on. I feel like things are just so fast paced with having a toddler and juggling all these things that that's how that's kind of what I got right now. And it works for me.
As long as you can make it work, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, let's start talking a little bit about the book that you chose. So tell us what book you chose and why you chose it.
So I chose the book is called Culpability by Bruce Holsinger, and I found it on Oprah Winfrey's book club list. So I tend to get a lot of my recommendations from there, or from my own book club, or sometimes even just podcasts that I listen to will mention certain books.
Tell us a little bit about your own summary of this book. So, for people who have never heard of this book, I had never heard of this book before you chose it. If you were to give someone a one paragraph summary or a back cover blurb, what would you say about this book?
So it's a story about a lot of different things. There were actually many themes in this book, but essentially it's a story that begins with a family that's in a self-driving vehicle, and they are on their way to their older teen son's lacrosse competition, and they get into a car accident right at the start of the book. And they end up hitting another car where two people get killed. They're all injured, from the car as well. It's really a book about kind of their recovery process and how they go through like a very in-depth like investigation as well. And it brings up a lot of stories or kind of thoughts about what is the role of AI and who is culpable in situations like this. Yeah, there are a lot of family secrets and interesting family dynamics throughout the book, too. So it just brings up a lot of thought provoking questions.
Yeah, a lot of family secrets and a lot of family dynamics. And as I was reading it, I kept thinking, I'm so glad I'm talking about this with a psychologist who can help me unpack all of the family secrets and all of the family dynamics. So for you as a psychologist, how did that impact your reading of this book? I mean, is it kind of a professional liability, perhaps, that you're reading a book, but I have to imagine you're also kind of analyzing the characters in the book at the same time.
Yeah, I can't lie. There was definitely a lot of analyzing. Yeah.
Is that a good thing for you? Do you enjoy that?
I think it just kind of may happen naturally. I think there's also this stereotype of sometimes like people will ask you what you do for a living and you tell them you're a therapist and then they automatically conclude that you're analyzing them. And that's in reality, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. I think in the context of this book, though, just kind of reading in detail all of the themes and the family dynamics, a lot of it is also just very relatable. I think families, some families may read this book and be like, hey, that kind of sounds like my family, right? So I liked the relatability of it and the way that he weaved the story together with all the different characters.
That relatability strikes home for me, absolutely. I related, I think, perhaps to an unfortunate degree to the narrator of the story, Noah, who's the father of the family. I mean, we're both around the same age, we're both professional. His wife kind of vastly outstrips him professionally, which is something that I am gaining familiarity with. Anjana, as a father of kids, my kids are a little bit older than his, but I didn't always like Noah, which is kind of a problem when you're identifying with the character a lot. What did you like best about this book?
One thing that really stood out to me was the interactions that Alice, who is this like middle child in the family, ends up having with an AI chatbot throughout the entire story.
Very
So
interesting,
reading
right?
those
Very
texts,
interesting.
yeah, reading those text was so intriguing because in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking like, this is really what's happening with a lot of the kids that I even see right now, right? Or even kids that are not even in therapy, but they're turning to these AI sources for therapy, essentially. And some of them, claiming it to even be a friend. As Alice was throughout the story, she was saying, this is essentially my best friend and my go-to person because I don't have anyone else in my life right now. So I found that, conversation really intriguing throughout.
How much is AI impacting your work as a psychologist and as somebody working with kids? Are you using it at all, or are you mostly just seeing it as a question that you have to answer with young people now?
Personally, I'm always hesitant, and so I'm not personally using it very much, but it's coming up, I think, where families more and more, kids more and more are going to do their research through ChatGPT or maybe Google some things that unfortunately are not very accurate. And I saw this actually maybe even prior to the rise of AI with social media and kids like self-diagnosing based on like popular TikTok trends and things that they're seeing online. Again, maybe drawing some of that relatability, but then not really understanding all the symptoms of what may be going on or the other context. So it's coming up more and more in conversations. And I think as clinicians, like potentially we're going to be moving more towards, an intake evaluations and assessments with families, not asking just like, are you using AI? But I think because it's here and everyone's really using it quite heavily at this point, it's going to be more of a question of like, how are you using AI? Or like, what information did you glean when you had that, maybe therapy AI conversation prior? Because some families may say they haven't had a history of therapy before, but really, maybe they have with an AI chatbot, and I'm really curious to know, like, what did you gain from that?
That's really, really interesting. This is the first novel that I've read where I felt like AI was a character in the novel,
Mhm.
right? There was so much in this book. I mean, you talked about the car crash at the very beginning of the book, and it's important to know that it was a self-driving vehicle that was being operated at that time. And then the mom is an expert in AI. AI just keeps cropping up again and again to the point where I started wondering if there were elements of the book where AI was responsible for various things that happened, which it was not, right? AI was kind of this shadow in the background as kind of an extra character to keep in mind, which I was glad for in many ways, because it's a question that, as you said, we're all dealing with, we're all talking about, we're all thinking about. And to have a novel that really addresses it head on, I think is really important right now. It's not going away. And it's only going to play a larger and larger role in the coming months and years.
Absolutely.
Were there themes in this book that particularly spoke to you, or parts of the book that you really liked a lot?
I think the title was very fitting, like culpability, who is responsible in these situations and for this accident that happened in the beginning. But I think it raises a lot of these questions around just the ethics and morals. And is there someone responsible, behind this AI that should take some accountability at some point? It's interesting because I finished reading the book like right as I was on a trip to San Francisco. And you may have heard of the like self-driving Waymo cars there. And so I saw so many of them driving around the streets, and I've gotta be honest with you, it kind of freaked me out. I was thinking, "There's no
Have you
way
been
you
in one
can't
yet?
be." Oh, you can't even pay me to get in a car like that right now. Yeah, and then, of course, I'm researching, like, wait, have there been accidents with Waymo? And, I looked up some articles where, like, it's hit, and killed these poor cats. I'm like, it's flawed. But there's also, right, all this data, and I don't know very much about all of the details, but is research that's suggesting like this is safer. This is maybe the direction we're going to be headed and where all the cars may look like this in 10 years. But for me, I think it's the sense of control. Like if I got into the car, I would want to maybe sit in the driver's seat and know that I can move it and manipulate it in a way if I needed to in case there was an accident.
So this is a quote that I've pulled from the book. It's on page 307. And I pulled this one particularly because it relates to this theme of AI, and it also relates to being a parent and children. So this is the mom, the AI ethicist, who's an AI ethicist, and she's talking with a tech mogul who shows up, and it plays a major role in the book as well. And she says, "But no one can keep our kids safe forever, not even you, Daniel. No matter how much money we throw at the problem, or how many guards we hire, or how many tracking apps we put on our phones, no matter how good your algorithm is, we can't protect them from everything. We just can't." And I understand that now better than I ever have before. Does that resonate with you as a psychologist, as someone who's seeing kids and talking with parents about these things?
It's funny you picked that quote. That's one that really stood out to me in the book as well. It resonated to me as a parent too, really more than anything. And like the actions that I currently take of really trying to protect my child sometimes from, trying to shield her from situations that I think may be unsafe. But it's also, this reality of like natural consequences that sometimes we can really grow from, right? I need to let my kid fall and scrape her knee and, have that experience to maybe realize that something she did was kind of dangerous, right? But obviously not high risk. I think if anything, that really stood out to me as a parent too, and how I move forward with my parenting.
Yeah, it's this parental desire to protect your kid from everything, but also know that failure is really important. And how do we have AI help our kids grow and succeed, which we absolutely want them to do, but also figure out who they are as people, as individuals, and not just part of this vast collective that is the AI of today? It's going to be really interesting to see how it develops and grows from here. That's for sure.
I know the other thing that comes to mind with me around that is how it's being used, even by students in particular. So there's so many protections and, regulations that are put now in schools around like you can't use AI to write your papers. And yet, kids are still doing it. I know they're coming to me and telling me sometimes they're doing it because also they're getting really smart and realizing like how they can maybe even get it to speak more like them and think like them in ways. So I think for me, it's also a question of like how it's impacting creativity, how it's impacting like critical thinking skills. Because unfortunately, we may get to a point where people are just relying on it for everything that they're not really thinking about things themselves.
Do you use AI you mentioned you don't use it in your psychology practice. Do you use it in other parts of your life at all?
So just for like editing, like maybe editing an email, getting an understanding of maybe like the tone of an email, I may use it in ways like that. Sometimes to like summarize something that I've already written up, to have like a summary page about it. I may use it in ways like that. But I will say like it's definitely infiltrating the field where there's like even AI note taking for therapy sessions, which, in some ways can be really helpful because that's something that is very time consuming for clinicians. And I think maybe with some editing, potentially, if you look at what it spits out, that is something that could also save time.
For me, I've discovered that my metric that I use is kind of the more I care about whatever task I'm doing, the less I use AI. So if it's a thing it's just a thing that I have to get done, then I will use AI. I'll give an example of there's an email that I have to send out every year or that somebody has to send out on my behalf every year to a large number of alumni. And the second time I sent it to them and I said, "Can you please forward this out to the alumni?" They said, "This is the exact text we sent out last year. Can you rewrite it?" The information that we were sending out was the exact same. It was just they didn't want to send out the same text. Well, I just put it into ChatGPT and had it give me 3 different options to say the same thing, but in different ways, because that wasn't something that I cared particularly about. And to me, I'm happy to use it in that kind of way. But if I'm writing something that's important, something that's personal, something that's just me, then I'm far less likely to use it. If we turn back to the book a little bit, is this a book ultimately that you recommend to people? Did you enjoy this book?
I did. I really enjoyed this book. I think everyone should read this book just to kind of further explore your own thoughts around where AI is going and the very practical, the very real things that are happening in our society right now and how it impacts people.
Did it change how you think about AI at all or the ethics around AI? Because as you said, there's a lot in here about AI ethics and who is culpable and what is our responsibility towards AI.
For me, it brought up even more the question of who is training the AI. And Lorelai, the mom in the book, I know has a quote somewhere where she talks about like we need to train the system to be good. No one's teaching it how to be good, which is part of what she tries to do in her work. And so it brings up that question of like whose definition of good, right, are we using and who are the people behind this? So I think it kept bringing up more questions of that for me.
For me, what I loved about this book the most actually was the pacing of it. I am not a binge reader. I actually will oftentimes intentionally extend reading a book where I will force myself to put it down, where I will force myself to go slow, because especially if I'm really enjoying the book, because I want to extend that opportunity to read it for the first time. I couldn't do that in this book. I kept coming back to this book. I kept reading 100 pages at a time, 150 pages at a time. And normally, because when I'm reading for a podcast, I will stop and take notes after every chapter. Well, first of all, these chapters are exceptionally short. These chapters are oftentimes 3 or 4 pages each, but the momentum, the questions, the plotting, there were so many times where there was this sense of foreboding. I found myself thinking about this book and thinking about, well, why did that happen? And they referred to this, but it's very clear that that's not what they meant. And why, where did this come from? And it really propelled me along. I will say I liked the first half better than the second half. There's a whole kind of second accident that happens in the second half that I thought was maybe a little bit too much. But I felt like that's a lot to happen in one summer in really short notice, to have these two major
Yeah.
events so close to one another. But overall, I thought it was a fantastic book, and I really, really enjoyed it a lot. One thing that I try and do in each podcast towards the end is to ask my guest and I both to think a little bit about where and how we might meet next based on this book, right? Some theme in the book. So have a little bit of fun with it. Are there anything that inspires you from this book or from the world of this book that you would think about maybe impacts how we might meet next?
The family in the book, I keep thinking about how they go on this nature retreat and they are doing all these outdoor activities. And I always think back to like our first experiences as a posse, like going out in the woods in a heat wave and camping together. I think it would be really cool. We had such a great time, right? And there were also such crazy things that happened during that experience. I've always thought about maybe recreating that adventure at some point and maybe doing another outdoor like outing, maybe more glamping than camping. Something with air condition may be fun.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no air conditioning in the large cabin that the 11 of us were in. And there's
Yeah.
a part of this book where air conditioning plays a role as
Yes.
well. Yeah, I think maybe I'll add to that the AI twist that it will all be virtual or something like that.
We'll be in a
But yeah,
VR
that was
headset.
certainly exactly. It'll all be in the metaverse, but we'll get together that way. That was certainly a formative experience for our posse,
Mhm.
and a good callback from this book. What are you going to read next? Any ideas, or are we just sticking to board books now, or something you're going to listen to?
So I am in a book club, and there was a book that was selected for this month. It is a romance novel, which is not typically something that I would pick up, but that's what's on my list next, and we'll see how it goes.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your reading group. How did you get into this book club?
So a friend of mine that I met when I first moved back to this area here, she was really into reading as well and decided to start a group. And so there's like a few of us that have gotten together. The book club's actually shifted quite a bit over time. It's paused at some points. We live in a very transient region with a lot of military people. And so it's kind of changed over time. But we get together once a month. Everyone rotates in picking something. When we can, we are, discussing the book. And most of the time, kind of like this, we're really just catching up and have another supportive network there where it's people that love books and love reading and connect in a good way.
Now you just have to turn it into a podcast. All right. Well, Lana, this has been a delight. It has been wonderful catching up. Thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being a great member of our posse. Thank you for being the first of the posse. 9 more to go, which I will get all of them on eventually. But thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Once again, thank you, Lana, for being a member of my posse, for being my friend, and for coming on the podcast, and for picking a terrific book, which I really enjoyed reading. Again, this was an excellent, excellent novel. And as Lana and I both said, we would both strongly recommend this book. I think it's very timely now. AI is a topic we're all thinking about. I think whatever you do, however you use or don't use AI, this book will help challenge you in thinking about the ethics of it and the role that it may play in your life. Okay, we will be back for a conversation with, I was about to say one of my oldest friends, but does that indicate that he's very, very old? That's not what I mean to indicate. What I mean to indicate is that I've known him longer than just about any other friend that I have. Jeremy Hornik and I go back to when I was 8 years old. 9 years old. I've known Jeremy a very, very, very long time. He has chosen a book, Cocktail Time by P.G. Wodehouse. I've never read Wodehouse before. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. It's supposed to be hilarious. Jeremy says he loves Wodehouse. I'm a little bit embarrassed I've never read Wodehouse. This is my chance to rectify that. So come back for that conversation with Jeremy. If you are not yet following Doug Reads with Friends on social media, please make sure you do so. I am on Facebook. I am on TikTok. I am on Instagram. Look how young and cool and hip I am to be able to push all of this. I post clips of upcoming shows, and I'm starting to try to create a little bit of community there for people to talk about shows. And you can also receive notifications and reminders when new episodes are out. Music for Doug Reads with Friends is provided by my friend, Erin Caffel. Thank you very much, Erin. Erin is a terrific, terrific musician and author in her own right and has provided this music for us that you're hearing right now. So please say thank you to her by checking out her music on Spotify. I'll see you when we're back here to talk with Jeremy. In the meantime, thank you for being my friend, and I'll talk to you soon.